Stop. Do not scroll past this. Not yet. Before this audio begins, before the first idea lands, before you decide whether this is for you or not, you need to understand something about this exact moment, about the specific and unrepeatable configuration of events that had to occur for your eyes to find this title on this day at this precise hour. There are more hours of audio content on the internet than a human being could listen to in 10,000 lifetimes. On this specific day, with the specific weight you are carrying, with the specific question that has been living somewhere beneath your thoughts for longer than you have allowed yourself to admit, out of all of that infinite noise, something stopped you here. You are going to call that the algorithm. I am going to call it an answer. Because here is what nobody tells you about searching. You do not always search with words. You do not always search with conscious intention. But the part of you that knows something is missing, that part never stops searching. It sends a signal, continuously, into every room you enter, every screen you look at, every moment of stillness where the noise drops just low enough for the deeper frequency to be heard. You have been sending that signal. This is what came back. Not by accident, by resonance. The oldest law in existence, that a frequency sent with sufficient depth and persistence will find its match in the field and draw it close. Your frequency found this, which means you are ready for what it contains. But I will warn you of one thing before we begin. What you are about to understand cannot be unfelt. Once you see the mechanism behind your own life, the signal you have been broadcasting, the world that has been faithfully answering it, you will never be able to look at your circumstances the same way again. That is not a threat. It is the beginning of your freedom. Chapter 1. The Station You Did Not Choose. There is something nobody told you about the radio. It is always on. Not sometimes, not when you think about it, not when you sit down to meditate or read a book about changing your life. Always. While you sleep, while you argue, while you stare at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, wondering why the same problems keep finding you. The signal never stops transmitting. The only question, the question this audio exists to answer, is this. Who set the dial? Picture a man. Call him whatever name feels familiar. He is 38 years old. He is not stupid. He is not lazy. He has worked hard his entire life, harder than most people he knows. He has read the books. He has watched the videos. He has written the goals in the notebook and stuck the photographs on the wall and said the words in the mirror on the mornings when he could make himself believe them. And yet, his bank account tells the same story it told 5 years ago. His relationships follow a pattern he could draw from memory. The same opening warmth, the same slow erosion, the same ending he saw coming and could not stop. His body carries a tension in the shoulders that has been there so long he has stopped noticing it. It is just part of him now. He is not suffering dramatically. That is the difficult part. He is suffering quietly, sustainably, at a level just below the threshold that would force him to stop and demand an answer. He is, in the language of physics, in equilibrium, and equilibrium is the most dangerous place a human being can inhabit. You know this man. You may be this man, or this woman, or some version of this person wearing your specific face and your specific history. The details change. The structure does not. The structure is this. You have tried to change the outside. You have moved cities, changed jobs, ended relationships, and started new ones. You have adjusted the circumstances with enormous effort and moderate results. And somewhere beneath the effort, a suspicion has been growing. The problem is not the circumstances. The problem is the signal you are broadcasting into them. Here is what physics knows that self-help forgot. Everything that exists is, at its most fundamental level, vibrating. Your hand, held up in front of your face, appears solid. It is not solid. Under sufficient magnification, it dissolves into molecules, then atoms, then the near-empty space inside atoms, where particles move so fast the solidity is an illusion produced by speed. What appears still is in constant motion. What appears fixed is frequency. You are not a solid object moving through a fixed world. You are a frequency moving through a field of other frequencies. And frequencies do not interact randomly. They interact according to a precise and merciless law. When two frequencies share the same pattern, they reinforce each other. When they do not, they pass through each other without contact. The technical word is resonance. The practical meaning is simpler. You only ever connect with what already matches you. There are two pianos in a room. You strike a single key on the first piano, the C above middle. You lift your finger, the note fades. And then, from across the room, the second piano responds. Its C string begins to vibrate, not because you touched it, not because someone told it to, because the wave produced by the first piano traveled invisibly through the air, passed through every string on the second piano, and found the one string vibrating at the same frequency. That string had no choice. When its frequency arrived, it answered. This is not a metaphor. This is acoustic physics. It happens in every concert hall, every practice room, every space where two instruments share the same air. Your life works on the same principle. The people who enter it, the opportunities that appear or fail to appear, the quality of what accumulates around you over the years, none of it is random. All of it is a response. The second piano answers the first. The field returns the frequency requested. What you call luck is resonance you did not know you were producing. What you call misfortune is the same. Now comes the part that is difficult to hear. The frequency you are broadcasting is not primarily the one you are aware of. Your conscious mind, the part that sets goals, makes plans, reads books like this one, represents approximately 5% of your total mental activity. 5%. It is the visible surface of an ocean. It is the lit room in a house where most of the rooms are dark. The other 95% is subconscious, and the subconscious does not respond to your intentions. It does not care what you want. It broadcasts what it has been programmed to expect. The man who grew up watching scarcity does not need to think about scarcity as an adult. He has been programmed to expect it. His body carries it as a baseline sensation, a low-frequency hum of not enough that runs beneath every conscious effort to accumulate more. He can say the words. He can write the goals. He can visualize the outcome with genuine desire. And the 95% will continue broadcasting not enough into the field around him. The field will continue responding in kind. This is not punishment, it is physics. The radio dial. Imagine your entire inner life as a radio dial. The dial runs from a frequency called contraction at one end to a frequency called expansion at the other. Fear, shame, resentment, unworthiness, these are contraction frequencies. They are low, dense, and slow. Gratitude, certainty, love, creative engagement, these are expansion frequencies, higher, faster, lighter. Most people's dials were set in childhood, not by choice, by repetition, by the emotional atmosphere of the house they grew up in, by what they were told about money, about their own worth, about whether the world was a safe place or a dangerous one, by the 10,000 small moments that accumulated into a worldview before they were old enough to question it. The dial was set by someone else, and then you grew up and carried it into every room you ever entered, into every relationship, every negotiation, every moment of decision, broadcasting the frequency that was installed in you before you had the language to refuse it. And the world, which is the second piano, has been responding ever since. Here is what this means in practice. You do not attract what you want, you attract what you are, which means, more precisely, what your subconscious has been rehearsing as true. A person who was taught that love always ends in abandonment does not consciously seek partners who will leave. They seek love with the same desire everyone does. But beneath that desire runs the rehearsed expectation. And that expectation broadcasts a frequency. And that frequency finds its resonance in the field. And one day, years into a relationship that seemed different, they look up and find themselves in the familiar ending. They say, "Why does this always happen to me?" The honest answer is, because you are always the first piano. The situations, the people, the outcomes, these are the second piano. They are responding to a signal they did not create. You created it. Not intentionally, not with malice toward yourself, but you created it. And because you created it, you can change it. That last sentence is the entire reason this audio exists, not to assign blame. Blame is a dead end. It changes nothing and costs everything. The purpose of understanding that you are the origin of your own frequency is not guilt. It is leverage. If the signal is coming from you, the dial is in your hands. If the dial is in your hands, the station can be changed. Not instantly, not without resistance. The dial has been in one position for a long time, and it will not move easily. But it will move. And when it moves, when the frequency shifts with genuine depth, not just surface intention, the second piano responds. The field reorganizes. The same world that was delivering one set of results begins delivering another. Not because the world changed, because the signal changed. Before we go further, there is something to establish clearly. This is not an argument that your pain was your fault. If you experienced genuine harm, violence, injustice, loss imposed on you by forces entirely outside your control, that harm was real. It did not require your permission. The world contains genuine darkness, and people are sometimes struck by it without any corresponding signal from their inner life. What this audio is addressing is not the exceptions, it is the patterns, the repeating structures, the recurring types of people, the same argument with a different person's face. The same financial ceiling was reached and retreated from, the same physical tension that appears whenever a specific kind of situation arises. These patterns, not the singular catastrophes, but the reliable repetitions, these are the signature of a frequency. And a frequency can be changed. There is a structure inside your brain called the reticular activating system. It is a small cluster of neurons at the base of the brainstem, and it performs one essential function. It decides what you notice. Your senses are receiving approximately 11 million bits of information per second. Your conscious mind can process around 40. The reticular activating system is the filter that selects the 40 from the 11 million. The criteria for selection are simple. It shows you what it has been told is important. Tell it, through repeated focus and emotional charge, that the world is dangerous, and it will find danger. It will surface the story on the news, the tone in your colleague's voice, the driver who cut you off, and filter out the 100 neutral or positive things that happened in the same hour. Tell it that opportunity exists, and it will find opportunity. In the same world, on the same day, moving through the same circumstances, it will surface a different 40 bits. This is not optimism. This is neuroscience. The reticular activating system does not change the world. It changes which world you perceive. And the world you perceive is the world you act in. And the world you act inside is the world that responds to you. The dial is biological before it is metaphysical. So here is where you are at the end of this first section. You are a broadcasting frequency. You have been broadcasting since before you could choose to. The broadcast is mostly subconscious, running beneath your conscious intentions like a current beneath the surface of water. The world around you has been responding to that broadcast with mathematical precision, producing the recurring patterns that feel like fate, but are closer to physics. The dial exists. It was set by someone else, and it can be reset by you. The only question that matters from this point forward, is how. That is what comes next. Chapter 2. What the projector is actually showing. There is a movie playing. It has been playing your entire life. It has a cast, a recurring set of locations, and a handful of themes that appear in different costumes, but tell the same story. You have laughed in it, and suffered in it, and spent enormous energy trying to change what happens on the screen. Nobody told you that you are not in the audience. You are in the projection booth. When you sit in a cinema, the screen in front of you appears to be the source of everything you experience. The color, the movement, the faces, the emotion, it all seems to originate there. But the screen is blank. It has no story of its own. It is a neutral white surface that receives and reflects whatever is sent to it from behind you. The source is always behind you. The projector carries the film carries the image. The image is cast forward through light and lands on the screen as what you call reality. If the film contains a story about scarcity, the screen shows scarcity. If the film contains a story about betrayal, the screen finds actors willing to betray. If the film contains a story about a person who is fundamentally unworthy of what they most desire, the screen will demonstrate that unworthiness in scene after scene with a consistency that feels like evidence. It is not evidence. It is a projection. The distinction matters enormously. Evidence is something the world is doing to you. Projection is something you are doing to the world. The first produces a victim. The second produces an architect. The screen is the same neutral surface either way. What changes is where you place your attention, and therefore where you place your power. Most people spend their lives trying to fix the screen. They work longer hours to change the number in the bank account without examining the film reel labeled, "I am not enough," that is spinning quietly in the projector. They leave one relationship and enter another without noticing that the new partner has been handed the same script as the last one. They move cities, change diets, redecorate the apartment. The screen changes temporarily, then the film reasserts itself. This is why genuine change is rare, and surface change is everywhere. The self-help industry is largely a screen-fixing industry. New habits, new environments, new affirmations applied to the outside of a life whose interior program remains untouched. It produces results the way rearranging furniture produces results. The room looks different. The house is the same. The only change that lasts is a change in the film. The film has 3 layers. The first layer is belief. What you hold to be fundamentally true about yourself and the world. Not what you say you believe when someone asks. What your body assumes without consultation. The beliefs that operate as background radiation. Invisible, constant, shaping everything without announcing themselves. A belief is not a thought you have chosen. It is a conclusion your nervous system reached under pressure and then encoded as fact. A child who repeatedly reaches for warmth and finds withdrawal does not consciously decide, "I am unlovable." The nervous system makes that calculation automatically, efficiently, in the service of survival. It files the conclusion, and then it runs that file every time a similar situation presents itself for the rest of the person's life, unless something intervenes. That something is awareness, which is what this audio is building toward. The second layer is expectation, belief's practical expression. If you believe the world is fundamentally scarce, you expect scarcity in specific situations, in negotiations, in relationships, in the gap between what you want and what you allow yourself to reach for. Expectation is belief in motion. It is the film actively playing. The third layer is emotional rehearsal, the feeling tone you return to most reliably, not the emotion you perform for others or aspire to in your better moments, the one who is waiting for you when the performance ends and you are alone. This is the deepest layer of the film, and it is the layer that broadcasts most powerfully into the field. You can change your thoughts without changing your emotional reaction. Millions of people do this daily with affirmations that produce nothing. The words are new, the feeling underneath is unchanged. The field responds to the feeling, not the words. Here is the mechanism in plain language. Your dominant emotional rehearsal, the feeling state you return to most reliably, is the frequency your life is organized around. The people and situations that enter your life are in resonance with that frequency. Not because the universe is conspiring, but because resonance is selective. Matching frequencies connect. Dissonant frequencies pass through each other without contact. When you change the emotional rehearsal at depth, not as performance, not as affirmation, but as genuine internal reorganization, the resonance changes. And when the resonance changes, the field responds differently. New frequencies become accessible. Old connections lose their charge. The patterns that felt like fate begin to dissolve because the signal that was sustaining them has been withdrawn. This is the mechanism. It is not magic. It operates whether you believe in it or not, the way gravity operates whether you believe in it or not. The question is whether you are running it consciously or unconsciously. Now we come to the part that screen fixers never reach, the shadow. Carl Jung spent his career mapping a territory most people refuse to enter, the parts of the self that have been judged unacceptable and pushed out of conscious awareness. Not destroyed, not resolved, pushed down, stored, running silently in the background of the personality like a program that was never closed. Jung called this the shadow, not because it is dark in a moral sense, because it lives in the part of the self where the light of conscious attention does not reach. Here is how the shadow forms. You are young. You express something: anger, ambition, neediness, exuberance, grief. And the response from the people around you is rejection, punishment, or withdrawal of love. The nervous system makes a rapid calculation. This part of me is dangerous. It costs connection. It must be hidden. And so it is hidden, suppressed, denied. And because it is denied, it does not disappear. It intensifies. It searches for expression through the only channel still available to it, the outside world. This is a projection in its most precise sense. What you cannot accept in yourself, you will find, with disproportionate emotional force, in others. The mechanism is observable and specific. When someone else's behavior produces in you a reaction that is significantly larger than the situation warrants, when you feel not mild irritation, but genuine rage, not passing discomfort, but deep, visceral offense, you are not simply reacting to them. You are reacting to yourself, to the part of yourself that their behavior is mirroring back. The person whose arrogance produces a fury that lasts for days, that fury is rarely about the arrogant person. It is about the arrogance that was beaten out of the observer at an early age, the permission to take up space, to assert worth, to believe that their presence matters. That permission was revoked, and now someone else is using it freely, and the wound opens. The person who cannot tolerate laziness in others, who polices it, condemns it, feels personally affronted by it. Somewhere in their history, rest was made to feel like a crime, and so they carry an internal tyrant who never permits stillness. And the person resting freely in their presence is an unbearable provocation. This is not comfortable material. It is not meant to be. The shadow is the most productive territory in this entire audio because it is the territory where the film is made. The denied parts of the self do not sit quietly in storage. They write the script. They cast the film. They produce, with remarkable creativity, the exact external circumstances required to bring the unresolved internal material back to the surface where it can, if the person is willing, finally be examined. The practical instruction here is one of the most counterintuitive in all of psychology. Stop looking at the other person. When a strong emotional reaction arises, when someone makes you feel something disproportionate to the situation, turn the attention inward. Do not assign blame to yourself. To ask a genuine question, what part of me is this touching? Where have I felt this before? Not with this person, but in the body, in childhood, in the earliest relationships. What am I not allowing myself to be or feel that this person's behavior is reflecting? These questions are not comfortable. They are productive. Every genuine answer withdraws a portion of the projection. Every portion withdrawn is a portion of the film that no longer needs to be played on the external screen. And every scene that no longer needs to play on the external screen is a pattern that will, gradually and then suddenly, stop repeating in your life. The enemy is the teacher, not metaphorically, mechanically. There is one more element of the mechanism that must be understood before we move forward. Time. Specifically, the delay between internal change and external result. The film in the projector changes before the screen changes. There is a lag. Matter is dense. Established patterns have momentum. A life organized around a particular frequency does not reorganize instantly when the frequency shifts. It reorganizes gradually, through a series of transitions that can look, from the outside, like things getting worse before they get better. Think of a ship changing course. The rudder moves. The ship continues in the original direction for some time before the turn becomes visible. If you judge the rudder's effectiveness by the ship's immediate position, you will conclude that it isn't working. You will move the rudder back, and the ship will complete its original course to its original destination, and you will say, "I knew it. Change isn't possible. The rudder was working. You stopped it." This is the most common point of failure in genuine internal work. The signal changes. The screen continues showing the old film for days or weeks or sometimes months because the old pattern has momentum. The person interprets the continued appearance of old results as evidence that nothing has changed. They abandon the new frequency and return to the old one. The screen stabilizes at the familiar image, and the cycle continues. What is required at this point, the only thing required, is the capacity to maintain the new frequency while the old results are still visible. To know, with a certainty that does not depend on current evidence, that the ship has turned. The screen is running on a delay. The new film is already in the projector. This is not wishful thinking. It is mechanical patience applied to a physical process. The rudder has moved. Hold it. So here is the mechanism in its complete form. You carry a film. The film was written early, under pressure, from a combination of inherited beliefs, encoded expectations, and rehearsed emotional states. That film is projected outward into every area of your life, producing results that feel external but originate internally. The shadow, the denied and suppressed material, is the most active scriptwriter, producing the most emotionally charged scenes specifically to bring the unresolved material back to the surface. When you change the film, through genuine internal reorganization, not surface affirmation, the external results change, not instantly. After a delay proportional to the density of the established pattern, the projector is yours. The film is changeable. The screen has no preferences. Now you understand the problem. Now you understand the mechanism. What remains is the question every honest person asks at this point. If I can see the film, why can't I simply change it? What is actually stopping the change from happening? That question has a specific answer, and the answer has a name. It lives between where you are and where you are going, and it will do everything in its power to send you back. Chapter 3. The Guardian at the Gate. There is a moment every person reaches, not once, repeatedly. It arrives at different points in different lives, but it always has the same texture. You have understood something, genuinely understood it, not just intellectually catalogued it. You have felt the mechanism working. You have had the small confirmations, the unexpected conversation, the door that opened without forcing, the moment where the second piano answered and you recognized the signal you sent. You are at the edge of something real. And then the floor drops. The car breaks down the morning of the most important meeting of the year. The relationship that was finally working produces an argument so familiar you could recite both parts from memory. The body that was healing develops a new symptom. The project that was gaining momentum hits a wall so complete it feels architectural, as if something built it specifically to stop you. The mind, which is always looking for the interpretation that requires the least courage, offers its verdict immediately. This is a sign, not the good kind, the kind that means stop, the kind that means this was never going to work, the kind that means go back. This interpretation is wrong, not sometimes, every time. What you are experiencing at this moment is not a stop sign. It is the most reliable indicator that exists that you are directly adjacent to a genuine change. The resistance is not evidence of impossibility, it is evidence of proximity. You are close. That is why it has appeared. To understand why, you need to understand what your nervous system is actually trying to do. Your body is not trying to make you happy. Happiness is not a biological priority. Your body is trying to keep you alive. And in the logic of the nervous system, which was built during a period of human history when survival depended on staying inside the known, alive and familiar are the same word. Every significant change, regardless of whether it is positive or negative, registers in the primitive brain as a threat. Not because the change is dangerous, because it is unknown, and unknown to the part of your brain that is still scanning the perimeter for predators means potentially fatal. This produces a biological response called homeostasis. Homeostasis is the body's drive to return to its established baseline. It operates everywhere in physiology, body temperature, blood chemistry, and heart rate. When any system moves too far from its set point, a corrective mechanism activates and pushes it back. This is essential for physical survival. It is catastrophic for personal evolution. Your life has a set point, not a fixed destiny, a habituated baseline, a level of income, relational depth, physical vitality, creative expression that your nervous system has learned to treat as normal. When circumstances push you significantly above that baseline, the corrective mechanism activates. Not through conscious decision, through behavior. You spend the unexpected money before you can adjust to having it. You create an argument in the relationship that was becoming too good, too stable, too unlike what you were taught to expect. You procrastinate on the project that would actually change things and accomplish with tremendous efficiency the tasks that will change nothing. From the outside, this looks like self-sabotage. From the inside, it feels like reasonableness. There is always a justification. The timing isn't right. You need more preparation. The circumstances aren't favorable. The rational mind is extraordinarily skilled at constructing logical frameworks around what is, at its root, a biological flinch. The set point is protecting itself. There is a more precise name for the moment when the set point fights back hardest. Call it the terror barrier. The terror barrier is not a metaphor. It is a specific and predictable point in the process of change where the gap between the old frequency and the new one produces maximum internal turbulence. You have internalized a new way of seeing yourself and the world. It has not yet been confirmed by external results, and the old programming, sensing its displacement, generates a response that feels in the body, in the emotions, in the quality of thought, like absolute certainty that you are wrong. The sensation is no doubt. Doubt is quiet. This is loud. It comes with physical symptoms, difficulty sleeping, a tightness in the chest that does not resolve, a quality of dread that attaches itself to ordinary moments, a voice that does not argue. Arguing would require engagement, but simply states, with the flat authority of something that has always been true, you are not capable of this. Most people, at this point, stop, not because they are weak, because the sensation is indistinguishable from accurate perception. It feels exactly like knowing, and when something feels like knowing, acting against it feels like ignoring reality. But it is not knowing. It is homeostasis in its most sophisticated form, the nervous system deploying the full weight of felt certainty to protect a baseline that has mistaken familiarity for safety. The terror barrier is the last defense of the old frequency. Cross it, and you are free of it. Turn back and it resets, slightly stronger, for next time. There is a ceiling above your happiness. This is not poetic language. It is a description of a specific psychological mechanism identified by researchers studying human performance and well-being. Every person carries an internal limit, a level of joy, abundance, love, creative fulfillment, beyond which something activates to pull them back down. The ceiling is set by what you believe you deserve, not what you consciously claim to deserve. What your nervous system, in its deepest programming, has decided is the appropriate allocation for a person like you. A person with your history, your failures, your particular catalogue of shame. When life exceeds that allocation, when things are going genuinely, sustainably well, the mechanism activates. Not through external events, through you. You started the fight that was unnecessary. You make the decision that undermines the progress. You develop the symptom, the crisis, the complication that returns you to the familiar level. And because the sabotage comes from inside, it carries no fingerprints. It looks like a circumstance. It feels like fate. It is the ceiling enforcing itself. The ceiling can be raised, but it cannot be raised by effort applied to the outside. More work, more striving, more forcing of results. These do not move the ceiling. They produce exhaustion at the same level. The ceiling moves when you become conscious of it, specifically when you can observe yourself approaching it in real time, when you can feel the activation beginning, when you can name it, not as evidence that something is wrong, but as evidence that something is right, that you have reached the upper limit of what your old programming considers safe. The naming alone withdraws a portion of the mechanism's power, not all of it, a portion, and portions accumulate. The instruction here is precise. When things are going well and you feel the impulse to disrupt them, stop. Do not act on the impulse. Breathe. Say with as much steadiness as you can locate, this is the ceiling. I am safe above it. I am expanding my capacity to receive. This is not an affirmation. It is an interruption. You are inserting a moment of conscious observation between the automatic impulse and the automatic behavior. That moment is where choice lives. And choice, exercised repeatedly at that specific point, is what moves the ceiling. Now we come to the resistance that wears other people's faces. You will not do this alone. You were not designed to, and the people around you who love you in the ways they are capable of loving you will, without malice and often without awareness, participate in the resistance. Here is why. When you change your frequency, you change the terms of every relationship organized around the old one. The person who needed you was anxious so they could feel calm. The person whose sense of adequacy depended on your smallness. The person whose own unexamined limitations are thrown into uncomfortable relief by your movement. These people are not villains. They are, in the language of the mechanism, crabs in a bucket. When one crab reaches the rim and begins to climb, the others pull it back, not from cruelty, from panic. The climbing crab is doing something that exposes the choice the others are not making, and that exposure is intolerable. So they pull. They do it with concern. I'm just worried about you. This doesn't seem like you. Are you sure this is a good idea? They do it with humor. The gentle mockery that is never quite gentle enough. They do it with silence. The withdrawal of warmth that signals without words that your growth is costing you their approval. The test at this point is not whether you can convince them. You cannot convince them, and the attempt will drain exactly the energy the change requires. The test is whether you can continue moving with love for them and without their permission. This is one of the loneliest passages in genuine change. The people who knew the old frequency cannot hear the new one. They are tuned to a station that you are in the process of leaving. The signal they are sending is real. It is also irrelevant for the direction you are moving. There is one more face the resistance wears, the most intimate one. The voice that lives inside you and speaks in the first person and says, with the particular authority of something that sounds like self-knowledge, "Who do you think you are?" This voice has many names. Imposter syndrome is the clinical one. The inner critic is the therapeutic one. What it actually is, stripped of all labels, is the internalized judgment of every person who ever told you, explicitly or implicitly, that you were not the kind of person who gets to have what you are reaching for. The voice is not yours. It was never yours. It was installed, without your consent, by people who were themselves operating from their own installed limitations. They did not give it to you out of malice. They gave it to you because it is what they had to give. But you have been carrying it as if it were self-knowledge, as if it were the accurate assessment of a neutral observer, as if the most relevant data point about your capacity were the opinion of someone else's fear, spoken in your own voice. It is not self-knowledge. It is an inherited limitation wearing the most convincing disguise available. Here is the truth about this voice that changes your relationship to it permanently. It does not appear when you are doing something small. You do not hear, "Who do you think you are?" when you make a sandwich, or walk to the corner, or do the tasks that confirm the existing set point. The voice is calibrated. It activates specifically in response to growth. It appears at the exact scale of the thing you are attempting, which means its presence is a coordinate. When the voice is loudest, you are closest. This reframe is not comforting. It is information. The voice's intensity maps directly onto the significance of what you are reaching for. A whisper means a small reach. A roar means you are standing at the edge of something that would actually change your life. Feel the roar. Stay at the edge. Move anyway. There is a specific and practical technique for the moment when the resistance peaks. Not a visualization, not an affirmation, a physical instruction. When the resistance is at maximum, when the voice is loudest, the body is tightest, and the impulse to retreat is strongest, you have a window of approximately 3 seconds before the rational mind constructs an architecture of justification around the retreat. 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, before the justification arrives, move. Not metaphorically, physically. Take the action that the resistance is organized against. Send the message. Make the call. Submit the work. Step into the room. The fear does not disappear before the action. It disappears inside the action. The moment you are moving, the guardian loses its ground. It is built for the threshold, not the interior. On the other side of the door, it has no jurisdiction. The 3 seconds are the entire battle. Everything before them is preparation. Everything after them is momentum. So here is where you are now. You understand the film, you understand the projector, you understand the delay, and you understand what appears between the decision to change and the evidence of change. The biological resistance, the psychological ceiling, the social pressure, the internal voice that speaks in your own language with someone else's fear. None of it is a sign to stop. All of it is a sign that you are at the exact location where change actually happens. The guardian is real, the door is also real, and the door opens inward. Chapter 4. Setting your own dial. Everything up to this point has been diagnosis, necessary diagnosis. You cannot change the station you cannot see. You cannot move a dial you do not know exists. The first 3 sections of this audio were not philosophy. They were preparation, the specific kind of preparation that makes the difference between a technique that works and one that produces temporary results and quiet disappointment. But the diagnosis is not changed. Understanding the mechanism is not operating it. This final section is different. It is not about knowing, it is about doing. Specifically, precisely, in the order that the mechanism requires. What follows is not a list of suggestions, it is a sequence. The sequence matters. Each step prepares the ground for the next. Applied out of order, it produces less. Applied in order, consistently, over weeks rather than days, it produces the thing that most people have stopped believing is available to them. A life organized around a frequency they actually chose. The first move, locate the dial. Before you can change the station, you need to know where the dial currently sits. Not where you believe it sits, not where you want it to sit, where it actually is, which means where your body reliably returns when the performance ends and the room is quiet. This is not an intellectual exercise. The mind will lie to you here. It will report the frequency you aspire to rather than the one you inhabit. The body will not. The instruction is simple and uncomfortable. Sit without distraction for 5 minutes. No phone, no music, no task. Just sit and do nothing, and notice what arises in the body without invitation. The sensation in the chest, the quality of the breath, the emotional tone that appears when there is nothing to distract you from it. That tone, the one that shows up in the silence, is your current station. Name it without judgment, not as a verdict, as a coordinate. If what arises is a low hum of anxiety, name it anxiety. If it is a dull background sadness, name it sadness. If it is a contracted vigilance, the body on alert for something it cannot identify, name it that. You are not diagnosing a flaw, you are reading a dial. And a dial you can read is a dial you can move. The second move, find the origin. Every frequency has a source. The anxiety that appears in the silence did not arrive from nowhere. It was learned in a specific environment, under specific pressure, as a specific adaptive response to a specific set of conditions that no longer exist. This step is not therapy. It is not an extended excavation of childhood. It is a single, precise question asked with genuine curiosity rather than self-accusation. When did this become the expectation? Not why, when. The why leads to analysis. Analysis leads to more analysis. The when leads to a memory. And the memory, located and examined from the perspective of an adult, rather than the child who formed the conclusion, often reveals something simple and devastating. The conclusion was reasonable at the time. Given the information available, given the developmental stage, given the emotional vocabulary of the child who reached it, the conclusion made sense. It was accurate to that moment. It was a solution to a real problem. It is no longer accurate. It is no longer a solution. It is an old map being used to navigate a territory it was never drawn for. You do not need to blame the person who gave it to you. You do not need to relive the moment in detail. You need only to see, clearly and without drama, that the frequency you have been broadcasting was installed before you were capable of choosing it. Seeing is the beginning of choice. The third move, change the rehearsal. This is the step where most approaches to inner change make their critical error. They attempt to change the thought. They install new beliefs through repetition, affirmations, visualizations, written declarations, without addressing the emotional frequency underneath. And because the emotional frequency is unchanged, the new thoughts float on the surface of the old feeling like oil on water. They do not penetrate. They do not reorganize. They produce at best a temporary elevation followed by a return to baseline. The field does not respond to thoughts. It responds to feelings, which means the change must happen at the level of emotional rehearsal. Here is the specific technique. Identify the feeling state that corresponds to the life you are moving toward. Not a vague, positive emotion, a specific feeling. The feeling of genuine financial ease. Not excitement about money, but the quiet, unremarkable sense that there is enough. The feeling of being genuinely known in a relationship. Not the intoxication of a new connection, but the settled comfort of being seen without performance. The feeling of doing work that uses your actual capacity, not pride, but the simple satisfaction of being in the right place. Find the specific feeling, then produce it deliberately, without the external circumstance that would normally generate it. This is the core of the practice and the part that the rational mind resists most completely. It feels fraudulent. The mind says, you cannot feel financially at ease when the account is overdrawn. You cannot feel genuinely known when you are alone. You cannot feel satisfied in work that is not yet use your capacity. The mind is thinking about it from the wrong direction. The external circumstance does not produce the feeling. The feeling produces the external circumstance. This is the mechanism stated in its most operational form. Feeling first, evidence second. Always in that order, never the reverse. The practical instruction is this: once per day, for a minimum of 5 minutes, produce the target feeling state through deliberate internal focus. Use memory if necessary, a moment when you felt something close to it. Use imagination. Use music or movement, or whatever internal technology most efficiently generates genuine feeling in your specific nervous system. The quality of the 5 minutes matters more than the duration. 5 minutes of genuine emotional immersion, the kind that produces a physical response, a shift in breath, an actual change in the body's chemistry, is worth more than an hour of mechanical repetition. The subconscious, which is running the broadcast, cannot distinguish between a feeling generated by external circumstance and a feeling generated by internal focus. It receives the emotional signal and adjusts the broadcast accordingly. The field receives the new broadcast and begins, with the delay the mechanism always includes, to respond. The fourth move: speak from the new station. The words you use are not descriptions of your reality. They are instructions to the mechanism that produces it. This is not mystical. It is neurological. Language shapes cognition. Cognition shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. The chain is unbroken, and it begins with the words you habitually use to describe yourself and your life. There are specific words that function as anchors to the old frequency, not because they are negative in a moral sense, but because of the vibrational signature they carry, the feeling state they generate in the body when used repeatedly. I can't afford it produces a felt sense of scarcity that reinforces the broadcast. I choose not to prioritize that right now produces a felt sense of agency. The external circumstance may be identical. The internal signal is different. I'm trying to change carries the embedded expectation of failure. Trying implies the possibility of not succeeding as the dominant scenario. I am changing states a present fact. I hope this works out according to circumstance. I know this is working. Reclaim it. The audit is not about positive thinking. It is about signal hygiene. Every time you use language that broadcasts the old frequency, you are watering the old signal. Every time you use language that broadcasts the new frequency, even when it feels like a slight overstatement of current reality, you are watering the new one. The subconscious, again, does not fact-check. It receives the signal and runs it as instruction. One specific practice, for 7 consecutive days, eliminate the complaint from your spoken language entirely. Not the internal experience of frustration. Suppressing that is counterproductive. The verbal broadcast of it. When something is difficult, address it practically without announcing it as evidence of how things are. The energy that was leaking through the complaint accumulates. You will notice it within days. It has a specific quality, a sense of increased internal resource, of more available to work with. This is not metaphor. It is the measurable result of redirecting broadcast energy from the old frequency to the new one. The 5th move, read the field. Once you have begun to change the broadcast, the field will begin to respond. Not with the dramatic confirmation the ego wants, with small, easily dismissed signals that are, if you know how to read them, precise and reliable. The unexpected conversation that answers a question you had not asked aloud. The book that appears, recommended by someone who could not have known you needed it, on the exact subject you were internally circling. The opportunity that arrives through a connection so unlikely that the rational mind immediately begins constructing explanations for why it is coincidence. It is not coincidence. It is the second piano responding to the first. The instruction here is to develop the practice of noticing without grasping. The field's signals are subtle, and they evaporate under the pressure of urgency or need. When you meet one, the meaningful coincidence, the sign that carries weight beyond its surface content, acknowledge it internally. Not with frantic excitement, with quiet recognition. There it is. This acknowledgement does the 2 things that sustain the process. It confirms to the nervous system that the new frequency is producing results, which makes the new frequency easier to maintain. And it keeps the channel open, because the field responds to receptivity the way a conversation responds to genuine listening. When you are listening, more is said. There is a practical calibration for distinguishing a genuine signal from wishful projection. The genuine signal arrives with a quality of unexpected rightness. It does not require interpretation. It does not need to be forced into meaning. It produces, in the body, a small but unmistakable physical response, a brief expansion in the chest, a subtle quickening, a sense of recognition that arrives before the thought that explains it. The projected signal requires work. You have to argue yourself into its significance. It feels like the meaning you are adding to it, rather than the meaning it carries. When you feel that you have to convince yourself it is a sign, it is not a sign. When the recognition arrives before the explanation, it is. The 6th move, cross the threshold. All of the above is preparation for this. There is a moment, specific, physical, unrepeatable, when the internal work must become external action, when the new frequency must be expressed not just in feeling and language, but in a choice that costs something. A choice that the old set point would not have made. A choice that puts something real, comfort, approval, security, the familiar story about who you are, on the line. This moment cannot be prepared for indefinitely. Indefinite preparation is the most sophisticated form of the resistance. It wears the face of responsibility and speaks the language of wisdom. Not yet. Almost ready. Just a little more preparation. There is no more preparation available that will make the threshold easier to cross. The threshold is crossed in full uncertainty. That is not a design flaw. That is the design. Certainty before action is not courage. It is waiting for conditions that will not arrive. The move is made uncertain and afraid, with the understanding that the fear is not information about the outcome. It is information about the location, that you are standing at the exact edge where the old frequency ends and the new one begins. 3 seconds. You know what you need to do. Not in the abstract, specifically. The email that needs to be sent, the conversation that needs to happen, the decision that has been circling for months, the thing you already know and have been preparing to know more clearly. Count backward from 3, move. The return. There is one final instruction, and it is the most important one. Return to the practice, not because you failed, because the mechanism is ongoing, because the dial requires conscious attention not once, but repeatedly, daily, in the ordinary moments, in the texture of regular life rather than the special circumstances of retreat or resolution. The man from the beginning of this audio, the one in the traffic jam, with the same bank account and the same argument, and the tension in his shoulders that had been there so long it felt like anatomy. He does not need a dramatic transformation. He needs to find the dial. He needs to understand that the station he is on was chosen for him before he could choose. He needs to learn to produce, deliberately and without the supporting evidence, the emotional frequency of the life that is possible for him rather than the life that was predicted for him. He needs to cross one threshold and then another, and return to the practice when the old signal reasserts itself, because it will, because homeostasis is patient and persistent and does not concede permanently after a single defeat. The work is not an event. It is a direction. There is a version of his life, and yours, that already exists as a frequency, not as a wish, not as a possibility that depends on circumstances cooperating, as a signal that is already present in the field, waiting for a matching broadcast to call it into form. The distance between where you are and where that life is does not require 10 years of linear effort. It requires a change in the film, a shift in the rehearsal, a new signal sent into the field with sufficient consistency and depth that the second piano has no choice but to respond. The radio is always on. The dial is in your hands. You have always been the one broadcasting. The only question that remains, the only one that ever mattered, is what you choose to transmit from here.